Welcome to Working Through a Strategic Plan. My name is Michael Huxley and I'm the Manager Business Analyst here at Create New South Wales. This first slide has text working through a strategic plan on the right and an image of teenagers playing drums in a bushland setting on the left. If you require a screen reader friendly transcription of this presentation, please contact multi-year at create.nsw.gov.au. I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm working on Gadigal country. Would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and those First Nations colleagues I work with, and any First Nations people who may be joining us today. The purpose of this presentation is to talk through what a strategic plan really is, and to act as a guide in preparing a strategic plan if you have concerns in preparing your Create New South Wales 4-year multi-year funding application. A strategic plan, at its most basic, is a high-level document that articulates what your organisation does, why you do it, and who you're doing it for. It's an opportunity to really talk about where your company has been, where it is now, and where you would like it to go. There's been some questions asked on if you have to use the Create New South Wales template, and the short answer is no. We've provided a guide, and as per the guidelines for the 4-year funding, you can use the strategic plan you may have created for your Creative Australia application, or if your organisation already has a plan that charts your strategic direction from 2025 to 2028, and it addresses the assessment criteria, we will accept that as well. We do, however, recommend that you look at the assessment criteria as part of the 4-year multi-year funding and double check that everything in the assessment criteria is covered off in your strategic plan. One of the upsides of the simpler application forms means you can tell your story in your own voice far more effectively than you can within, say, 5 boxes of 300 words in a Smarty Grants form. And what's really important is that your strategic plan reflects your organisation, what it does, and why, and not just be thought of as part of a grant application. So the elements of a strategic plan are basically the why, the what, and the how of your organisation. And we'll break each of these down just a little bit. The why effectively splits into 3 areas. The first of these is your vision, which is a forward-looking statement of what you really want the world to look like if the current barriers to that happening didn't exist. The mission then talks about how you will dismantle those barriers to make that vision a reality. And as part of a progress check, you provide the goals which enable you to actually check to see how you're progressing with your mission and the delivery of the vision. So, for example, here's 2 corporate vision and mission statements. I think they are clear that the vision is the world they would like it to be, and the mission is how they plan to get there. I'll just give you a bit of time to have a look at this screen. The next key element of a strategic plan is really the what. It's a summary of your organization's past, how it got here, and the activities your organization wants to do in the future. It really should include a summary of your operating environment so that you can then look at both the internal and the external factors that impact and determine what you do. There's a number of tools available to help you look at operations. You can use a good old-fashioned SWOT tool looking at strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. You can do a noise analysis or a pestle analysis. Both of those are outlined in the guide to help you make a strategic plan, or you can use what works for you. Here's a breakdown and an example of a SWOT. What's great about a SWOT analysis is it looks at both internal and external factors. So your internals are your strengths and your weaknesses, and your external factors are your opportunities and threats. And you can use some prompts and, maybe ask, what are our staff's strengths and weaknesses? What are the services and our products? What's really great about them? What do people not like about them? Who's your competition, which is an external issue, and perhaps what are some governance issues? For example, there's been some recent changes in HR legislation on the length of contracting staff, and that may impact how you're hiring people. So I've just pulled together some strengths, like you might have a really committed staff. You've got really strong financial reserves. You've got a great committed audience who's going to follow you with what you do. And as a weakness, you might have an old website. Again, with staff, you might not have that specialist skill that you need in one of your staff members. You might have an old constitution that hasn't been looked at with changes that have happened in legislation or any changes that have happened with the ACNC. Looking at some opportunities, you might have some opportunities around perhaps a stronger external partnership with a local radio station. You may be developing some activities that will now be pay for service where previously they've been offered for free. There might be more opportunities with philanthropic funding if you can align what you're doing and why you're doing it with that of a philanthropic organisation. And then there are some threats you might like to consider. So, for example, the changes in the media landscape. We know the reduction, particularly in regional areas of print media, has made it quite difficult to get coverage. And there's also maybe a threat of losing connections to your community because you have to change the space you're working from. And please remember, this is just an example. There's a term that's used in the guide that talks about pillars of activity. Well, one way to work out what those pillars might be is you might like to grab some post-it notes, write down everything you do, every activity you do, every program you do, and then clump those together as groups. And then each of those groups become a pillar. It just becomes a way of consolidating, talking about what you do. So if you're in the museum and gallery sector, you might run a series of workshops that are about conservation, disaster preparedness, storage, but what those workshops are really about are about skill development or sector development. So you could bundle all of those together as one of your pillars and call that activity skill development or making a stronger sector. Another bit of the what is articulating who you are doing this activity for. Now, they could be other organizations, and they could be people who are relying on the services you provide. You need to clearly articulate the audiences who you are going to engage with for these activities, and that each activity you do may in fact have a separate and discrete audience. And it's fine that each product you deliver has a separate audience. That's okay. If this is your first time writing a strategic plan, the what is a really great place to start because you're starting with what you know that you do. The how in the strategic plan often takes up, I guess, what most people consider the nuts and bolts of the plan. It's also about the governance of your organization. What are your financial plans? What is your financial model? How do you address risk? And how might you look at your marketing and communications plan? You might already have a separate risk register. You may already have a separate marketing and communications plan. You don't need to put all of those into the strat plan. You just need to get a summary of those into the strat plan. In terms of governance, it's looking at how your company makes decisions. Who are its senior staff? What is the organizational structure? What is the role of the board in decision making? How does the organization adhere to any legislation? How does that sort of compliance check happen who's responsible for it, and who's responsible for each bit of the operation within the organization. Your financial plan should outline what the projected financial outcomes are going to be over the period of the plan. If you can, you should talk about the financial model for your organization, so you can articulate how you're going to use your income and how you're going to earn it and what you're going to spend it on. And if you're going to use your reserves, then how are you going to use them to deliver a program? And you can talk about it strategically, so it's not just like, we're running a deficit and there's no risk management about that. With risk, you might like to look at 5 different areas of risks as a prompt. So you could look at financial risk, governance, operation, strategic risk, and risks involved about not complying with legislation or workplace health and safety. And then once you've kind of mapped all those out, you can then summarize your top 5 risks and how you're going to manage them by either reducing their impact or the likelihood of happening. And there's a section on risk management in the guide. With your marketing and comms plan, it's useful to talk about what channels you're going to use to communicate with your audience. If everything's going to be via social media, which is really common these days, what is the impact of that if you do that? There are people who aren't on social media. How are you going to reach them? Is an e-newsletter part of your battery of how you talk to people? Are you using some kind of notice board? Using posters, flyers? Are you using a radio station? Do you have a regular spot there? The plan should say how you intend to communicate what you're doing to your target audience, but it should also include how you are going to measure that and whether it's been successful. I just want to spend this last bit talking about some of the key information that it should be in your financial plan. So within the strat plan, you really want this high-level breakdown of your basic areas of income and your basic areas of expenses. And we've provided a really simple template in the guide. The base year should be the year before your strategic plan kicks in. So if your strategic plan is from 25 to 28, then you really want your base year to be 2024. And this way you can actually see the impact of what's going to happen with your activities in 25, 26, 27, and 28. And if you're a current multi-year funded client of Create, you'll already know your 2025 level, so you can pop that in and you can then make your 2026 level what you are applying for in the application. One of the questions asked is, how do I know how to increase my expenditure? Well, if you're looking at the forward projections of the CPI, which is currently projected between 1% and 2%, then you can use that to build and increase your expenses. You may wish to build in a small buffer in some areas, but remember, this is a high-level projection based on current information. And then once you've done that, you can look at, well, are we going to put our wages up every year? Is every expense going to go up by the CPI? Is the level of activity in future years going to increase and decrease? I think the other thing is with income, it's like, it doesn't have to be confirmed, but if you think you're going to do that, put that in. And it's important that the plan reflects your plan of activities, that everything tells the same story. And while it's fairly easy to maybe predict the next 12 or 24 months, the sort of year 3 and 4 may be a little more vague, and that's okay. People's crystal balls aren't as good as they used to be. Another part of the financial plan is your summary of financial position, or often referred to as the balance sheet, across the life of the plan. And the quick way to do this is you start with your base year. So you start with your 2024 figures. You then look at the results for each year, year 1 through to year 4, and that will give you your change in equity. So if you start with an equity of, say, $100,000 in your base year, and in year 1 you're planning to make a surplus of $10,000, then at the end of year 1, your equity will have increased to $110,000. Now, that may happen because you may have more cash at the end of the year. You may have less liabilities, so you may have paid down some debt or drawn down some grants. You may have invested in an asset, so therefore you put the increase into there. Also remember the very basic balance sheet equation, which is assets minus liabilities equals equity. And so that always can become a sort of internal check. And just a reminder, if you're a council-run cultural business unit, you should include your whole of council finances here, and that information should exist in a forward plan. So you can start with going, are our liabilities going to be the same? Are our cash going to be the same? And you can adjust that through noting what your projected end of financial year result is going to be from the. So I hope this has been helpful. It's been a very quick run through. If you have any questions, please reach out. Contact us at multiyear@create.nsw.gov.au. You can also use the resources page on the Create New South Wales website, or you can make a booking with one of our team members. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.